Wife said this marriage isn't working. While folding laundry, my response shocked her. I don't think this marriage is working. She said it while sorting through our laundry basket, not even looking up, like she was commenting on the weather. But what she didn't expect was my response. Finally, we agree on something. The look on her face was priceless. Pure shock mixed with confusion. She'd been setting up some dramatic manipulation scene, but I was about to flip the entire script. By the time I was done, she'd be begging me to forget she ever said those words. If you're into honest stories about relationships, trust, and betrayal, hit that follow button. You won't want to miss the next one. Let me back up and explain how we got to this moment, because this story starts long before that Tuesday evening when my wife Diana tried to blow up our 9-year marriage with casual indifference. For the past 2 years, Diana had perfected the art of making me feel like everything I did was wrong. My laugh was too loud at restaurants. My movie choices were juvenile. My decision to visit my brother was selfish timing. Every conversation had become a performance review where I was consistently failing. But here's what she didn't realize. I'd been taking notes too. I was sitting at our kitchen table finishing some work emails when those fateful words hit the air. I don't think this marriage is working. Any normal husband might have dropped his pen, started asking questions, maybe even begged for an explanation. Not me. I looked up at her, took a moment to really process what she'd just said, and then did something she clearly wasn't expecting. I nodded. Finally, we agree on something. The shock on her face was immediate and total. She stopped mid-fold, a t-shirt hanging from her hands like a forgotten prop. What do you mean? She asked, her voice suddenly lacking that casual confidence she'd had just seconds before. Exactly what I said. This marriage isn't working. You're absolutely right. I closed my laptop and gave her my full attention for what felt like the first time in months. I've been thinking the same thing for a while now. She opened her mouth, then closed it again. This wasn't going according to whatever script she had in her head. I could practically see the gears turning as she tried to figure out her next move. But don't you want to try to fix it? She asked. And there it was. The expected response she was fishing for. The desperate plea. The promise to change. The emotional breakdown that would put her back in control of the narrative. Fix what exactly? I leaned back in my chair, genuinely curious about her answer. The constant criticism, the way you talk to me like I'm some kind of inconvenience in your life? Or maybe the part where you dismiss everything I say before I even finish saying it. Her face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Anger, defensiveness, then something that looked almost like panic when she realized I wasn't playing the role she'd cast me in. You're being dramatic, she said, defaulting to her usual tactic of making me feel like my concerns were invalid. Am I? Last week, you told me I was embarrassing you in front of your friends because I laughed too loud at dinner. 3 days ago, you said my choice in movies was juvenile and refused to watch anything I picked. Yesterday, you rolled your eyes when I mentioned wanting to visit my brother next month. I counted off on my fingers like I was listing groceries. Should I keep going, or do you get the picture? The silence that followed was different from our usual uncomfortable silences. This one had weight to it, like the air right before a storm breaks. I didn't mean, she started, but I held up a hand. No, you meant it. All of it. And you know what? That's fine. People grow apart. Priorities change, whatever. But here's what's going to happen next. I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through my contacts. I'm going to call my lawyer first thing Monday morning. Her eyes went wide. Your lawyer? You can't be serious. Dead serious. In fact, let me save us both some time. I found the number I was looking for and hit call, putting it on speaker. It went straight to voicemail, which was perfect. Hi, this is for Attorney Johnson. This is calling about starting divorce proceedings. I'll need to schedule a consultation as soon as possible. My wife and I have mutually agreed that our marriage isn't working, so I'd like to get the ball rolling. Please call me back Monday morning. I hung up and looked at her. There, problem solved. She was staring at me like I'd just announced I was moving to Mars. You didn't even give me a chance to explain what I meant. Explain what? You said the marriage isn't working. I agreed. What's to explain? I stood up and stretched, feeling lighter than I had in months. Unless you're saying you didn't mean what you said, because that would mean you were just trying to manipulate me into some kind of emotional reaction. The way her face changed told me everything I needed to know. Bingo. That's not... I wasn't, she stammered. For the first time in our entire relationship, she was the one scrambling for words. Look, I'll make this easy for you. You're right. This marriage isn't working. It hasn't been working for a long time, and we both know it. The difference is, I'm not interested in pretending otherwise anymore. I picked up my keys from the counter. I'm going to grab dinner somewhere. When I get back, I'll start moving my stuff into the guest room. We can figure out the details like adults. Where are you going? The question came out sharper than she probably intended. Does it matter? We just established we're getting divorced. I paused at the door and turned back to her. But hey, at least now you won't have to worry about being embarrassed by me anymore. The drive to the restaurant gave me time to think, and honestly, I felt better than I had in years. No more walking on eggshells. No more second-guessing every word that came out of my mouth. No more pretending that constant criticism was normal in a marriage. My phone buzzed with 3 texts from her while I was ordering. I didn't even bother reading them. Whatever she had to say now, she'd had 2 years to say it when it might have mattered. The irony was that she'd probably expected tears, pleading, maybe even anger. What she got was agreement and action. Quick, decisive action that left her scrambling to figure out how to regain control of a situation she'd just lost completely. By the time I got home with my takeout, she was pacing in the living room like a caged animal. The laundry basket was exactly where she'd left it, clothes still half folded, which told me she'd spent the entire time I was gone trying to process what had just happened. We need to talk, she said as soon as I walked through the door. No, we don't. We talked. You said the marriage isn't working. I agreed. End of conversation. But I didn't mean we should get divorced. I stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. Then what exactly did you mean? And there it was again. That moment where she realized she didn't have a good answer, because the truth was she'd been trying to manipulate me, and it had backfired spectacularly. I meant maybe we could work on things, she said weakly. Work on what? You've spent 2 years telling me everything I do wrong. You've made it clear that I'm not the husband you want. So why would you want to work on keeping something that doesn't work? I opened my food container and grabbed a fork. Face it, you got exactly what you asked for. Monday morning came faster than she expected, but not faster than I was ready for. While she was still in bed, probably hoping this was all some kind of bad dream, I was already on my 2nd cup of coffee and my 3rd phone call. Attorney Johnson had called back at 8 sharp, and by 8:30 I had an appointment scheduled for that afternoon. The house hunting had started even earlier. I'd been scrolling through listings since 6 a.m., and by the time she dragged herself downstairs in her robe, looking like she'd barely slept, I already had 3 properties lined up to view. You're up early, she said, trying to sound casual but failing miserably. Productive morning, I replied without looking up from my laptop. Found a few places that looked promising. Should have something locked down by the end of the week. Her coffee mug stopped halfway to her lips. Places? Houses. You know, the thing people live in when they're not married anymore. I scrolled to the next listing. This one's got a nice workshop in the garage. Always wanted to get back into woodworking. She sat down across from me with that careful, measured movement people use when they're trying not to appear desperate. Don't you think you're moving a little fast? Fast. I finally looked up at her. You declared our marriage dead on Saturday. It's Monday. If anything, I'd say I'm being efficient. I didn't declare it dead. I said it wasn't working. Same outcome, different words. I turned the laptop screen toward her. What do you think of this one? 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, nice yard. Asking price is well within my budget. The way her face went pale told me she was starting to understand that this wasn't some elaborate bluff designed to get her attention. This was real, and it was happening with or without her input. Your budget? She asked, and there was something sharp in her voice now. My budget, my house, my fresh start. I closed the laptop and stood up. Speaking of which, I should get going. Meeting with Johnson at 2 p.m. Then I've got 3 showings scheduled after that. You can't just leave me out of major financial decisions. We're still married. I paused at the kitchen counter where I was grabbing my keys and wallet. You're absolutely right. We are still married for now. But here's the thing about decisions. When someone declares they want out of a partnership, they lose their vote on what happens next. Her mouth opened and closed like she was trying to catch flies. It was becoming a habit of hers. Besides, I continued, wouldn't want to embarrass you with my poor decision-making skills. Remember what you said about my judgment last month? That hit home. I could see it in her eyes. The moment she realized that all those little cuts she'd been making over the years were about to come back and slice her in ways she never anticipated. My phone rang. It was my brother calling back after I'd left him a voicemail earlier. Hey, yeah, it's happening, I said, answering the call right there in the kitchen. Should be official within a few weeks if everything goes smoothly. I glanced at her. No, she's handling it about as well as you'd expect. Lots of shock and disbelief that actions have consequences. Her face went red. Are you seriously discussing our personal business with your family? I covered the phone. Our personal business? I thought you said this marriage wasn't working. That makes it former personal business. I went back to the call. Yeah, I'll keep you posted. Thanks for the support. After I hung up, she just sat there staring at me like I'd transformed into someone she didn't recognize, which in a way I had. 2 years of being told I was inadequate had finally ended, and apparently she was meeting the real me for the first time. Who are you right now? She asked, and the question sounded genuinely bewildered. I'm the guy you married before you decided he wasn't good enough. Turns out he was just sleeping under all that criticism you piled on him. I headed for the door. Don't wait up. I'll probably grab dinner out after the house showings. The first showing was perfect. A craftsman-style house with character, good bones, and enough space for me to actually breathe. The real estate agent was a sharp woman in her 50s who clearly knew her business. Divorce? She asked matter-of-factly as we walked through the master bedroom. That obvious? You've got that freedom, tastes better than I remembered look. She opened the walk-in closet. See it all the time. This one's got good energy for fresh starts. By the time I got home that evening, she'd apparently spent the day making phone calls of her own. I could tell because she had that frantic, slightly desperate energy that comes from getting advice you don't want to hear. I talked to my sister, she announced as soon as I walked through the door. Good for you. How's she doing? She thinks you're having some kind of midlife crisis. I laughed, actually laughed out loud. A midlife crisis? That's what we're calling it when someone refuses to be treated like garbage anymore. You're not being treated like garbage. You're being dramatic. There it is again. Every time I point out something you've done, I'm being dramatic. Every time I have a reaction to your behavior, I'm overreacting. Do you see the pattern here? She didn't answer, which was answer enough. Let me guess what else your sister said. She probably told you that all marriages go through rough patches, right? That I just need time to cool off. Maybe suggested you give me some space and I'll come crawling back? The way her expression didn't change told me I'd hit the nail on the head. Here's the problem with that theory, I continued. It assumes I was acting out of emotion instead of logic. This isn't a rough patch. This isn't a phase. This is me finally accepting what you've been telling me for 2 years, that I'm not the husband you want. That's not true. Then why did you say the marriage wasn't working? Another one of those long pauses where she tried to find an answer that would put her back in control. Because I was frustrated. Because I felt like we weren't connecting anymore. And whose fault was that? Because I tried talking to you about it multiple times. Remember what you said? You're too sensitive. You take everything personally. Can't you just let things go? I shook my head. Well, congratulations. I'm finally letting it go. All of it. My phone buzzed with a text from the real estate agent. The sellers had accepted my offer on the Craftsman house. I smiled and typed back a quick acceptance. What's that about? She asked, trying to read over my shoulder. Just bought a house, close in 3 weeks. I pocketed the phone. Guess I'll be out of your hair sooner than expected. The color drained from her face completely. You bought a house without even discussing it with me? Why would I discuss it with you? You said the marriage isn't working. That means we're not a team anymore. Teams discuss major decisions, Divorced people make their own choices. We're not divorced yet. Details. The paperwork is just catching up to the reality. I headed upstairs to start packing more of my things. I could hear her on the phone again before I even reached the top of the stairs, probably calling her sister back, or maybe her mother this time, looking for someone to tell her that this was all just a big misunderstanding that could be fixed with the right approach. But here's what none of them understood. This wasn't about anger or hurt feelings or wounded pride. This was about finally accepting the truth she'd been showing me all along. She didn't respect me, didn't appreciate me, and honestly didn't seem to like me very much. The only difference was that now, instead of trying to change her mind, I was changing my address. 3 weeks later, I was standing in my new kitchen unpacking the last box of dishes when it hit me. I couldn't remember the last time I'd felt this relaxed in my own space. No walking on eggshells, no bracing myself for the next criticism, no analyzing every word before I spoke. Just peace. The house had turned out even better than I'd hoped. The workshop in the garage was already set up with my old tools that had been gathering dust in storage, and I'd started a project building custom shelves for the living room. Turns out, when you're not constantly being told your hobbies are a waste of time, you actually enjoy doing them again. My routine had settled into something I actually looked forward to. Morning coffee on the back porch, reading the news without someone commenting on my choice of articles. Evenings in the workshop, classic rock playing as loud as I wanted. Weekends doing whatever struck my fancy without having to justify it to anyone. It was during one of those Saturday morning coffee sessions that my neighbor introduced herself. She was trimming roses in the yard next door when she looked over and waved. "You must be the new guy." "I'm Helen," she called over the fence. "That's me. How'd you guess?" She laughed. The previous owner was 83 and hadn't used that workshop in about 15 years. I can hear the saw running again. It's nice. Sounds like the house is alive. We chatted for a few minutes about the neighborhood, local restaurants, that sort of thing. Normal, pleasant conversation without any underlying tension or hidden agendas. Revolutionary concept. "My daughter's visiting next weekend," Helen mentioned as she gathered up her gardening tools. "She's about your age, just moved back to town after finishing her residency. Maybe you'd like to join us for a barbecue. Always nice to meet the neighbors." I almost said no out of habit, then realized there was absolutely no reason to turn down a friendly invitation. "That sounds great. Can I bring anything?" "Just yourself. Saturday around 6. That's how I met Dr. Emily Chen. Helen's daughter turned out to be a pediatrician with an easy laugh and the kind of confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are and what you want from life. What struck me most was how natural the conversation felt. She asked about my woodworking, seemed genuinely interested when I described the shelving project, even offered some suggestions about organizing tools that actually made sense. When I mentioned I was recently divorced, she didn't get that awkward look people sometimes get, didn't start fishing for details or drama. "Fresh starts can be liberating," she said simply, raising her beer bottle in a mock toast. "Here's to figuring out what makes you happy." We talked for hours that night, about books, about travel, about her work with kids and my work in project management. Real conversation where both people were actually listening instead of just waiting for their turn to talk. By the time I walked back to my house, I realized I'd laughed more in one evening than I had in the previous 6 months. She texted me the next day. Nothing dramatic or loaded with meaning, just a simple, "Thanks for the good conversation. Hope you get those shelves finished." I found myself looking forward to her messages. They were sporadic, never needy or demanding, just the kind of casual communication between two adults who enjoyed each other's company. Sometimes she'd send a picture of something funny she'd seen at the hospital, or I'd share a photo of my latest project. Meanwhile, my phone had been buzzing regularly with calls and texts from Diana. I'd stopped answering most of them after the first week of the same circular conversations. She wanted to talk things through, wanted to try counseling, wanted me to give us another chance. The thing was, I didn't want another chance with her. I wanted the chance I was already taking, the one where I got to be myself without constant judgment. One evening, about a month after I'd moved out, she showed up at my new house unannounced. I was in the garage working on a coffee table when I heard the doorbell. Through the workshop window, I could see her standing on my front porch looking nervous. I took my time walking to the door, partly because my hands were covered in wood stain, and partly because I wasn't particularly eager for whatever conversation was about to happen. "Nice place," she said when I opened the door, trying to peer past me into the house. "Thanks. What do you need?" Straight to the point. No small talk, no pretending this was a social visit. "I wanted to see where you're living now. Wanted to talk. We've talked plenty. You said the marriage wasn't working. I agreed. End of story. But I've been thinking, that's a dangerous habit." I leaned against the doorframe, making it clear she wasn't being invited in. "What conclusion did all this thinking lead you to?" "Maybe I was too hasty. Maybe we gave up too easily." "We? I don't remember giving up on anything. I remember agreeing with your assessment and taking action accordingly." She shifted from foot to foot, clearly uncomfortable with my matter-of-fact tone. "Don't you miss what we had?" "What we had? You mean the constant criticism? The eye-rolling? The way you made me feel like everything I did was wrong?" I shook my head. "No, I don't miss that at all. We had good times too." "Did we? Because honestly, I'm having trouble remembering them. Maybe that should tell you something about the quality of those good times." Her face went through that familiar cycle of emotions: surprise, hurt, anger, then back to manipulation mode. "You're different," she said, like it was an accusation. "You're right. I'm happier. I'm more relaxed. I actually enjoy my own company again. Funny how that works when you're not constantly being told you're inadequate." Just then my phone buzzed with a text. I glanced at it automatically. A message from Emily about a new restaurant she'd tried, wondering if I'd like to check it out sometime. "Who's that?" Diana asked, and there was something sharp in her voice. "A friend." "What kind of friend?" "The kind that treats me like an adult instead of a disappointment." I put my phone back in my pocket. "Look, I appreciate you stopping by, but I've got plans tonight." "Plans with this friend? Plans that don't involve rehashing a relationship that you already declared wasn't working?" I stepped back and started closing the door. "Drive safe." I didn't wait to see her reaction. I had a coffee table to finish and a text message to respond to. The coffee table would be beautiful when it was done, and the text message was from someone who actually enjoyed talking to me. For the first time in years, I had better things to do than analyze what I'd done wrong in a conversation with someone who'd already decided I wasn't worth the effort. 2 weeks after her unannounced visit, the phone calls started coming from mutual friends. First, it was Tom from our old neighborhood, calling with what he probably thought was subtle curiosity. "Hey man, just checking in. Heard you and Diana are having some issues." "No issues," I replied while sanding down the dining table I was refinishing. "We had different ideas about whether our marriage was working. Turns out we were both right. But she's telling everyone you just up and left without warning, said you're going through some kind of breakdown." I stopped sanding. "A breakdown? That's interesting. What else is she saying?" "Well," Tom sounded uncomfortable now. "She mentioned you're not thinking clearly. Maybe drinking too much, making impulsive decisions. She's worried about you." The picture became clearer with each call. Diana had apparently launched a full campaign to rewrite the narrative. According to her version of events, I was the unstable one having a crisis, while she was the concerned wife trying to save our marriage from my self-destructive behavior. When my college buddy Jake called with a similar story, I decided to set the record straight. "Jake, let me ask you something. In all the times we've hung out over the past couple years, how many times did she criticize something I said or did in front of you?" There was a long pause. "I mean, she had opinions about things. How many times did she roll her eyes when I was talking? How many times did she correct me or make little comments about my choices?" Another pause. Longer this time. "Okay, yeah, she could be pretty harsh sometimes. So when she tells you I'm having a breakdown because I finally stopped accepting that treatment, does that sound like someone who's lost his mind or someone who's found his backbone?" The calls stopped coming after that. Word travels fast in small social circles, and apparently my side of the story made more sense to people who'd actually witnessed our interactions over the years. But she wasn't done. The next phase of her campaign was more direct. I was having lunch with Emily at a local cafe when my phone started buzzing with texts, then buzzing some more. By the time I checked it, there were 17 messages waiting, all from Diana. "Everything okay?" Emily asked, noticing my expression as I scrolled through them. The messages started reasonable enough. "We need to talk about dividing up the wedding gifts," but quickly devolved into emotional manipulation. "I can't believe you're throwing away 9 years like they meant nothing," and eventually landed in full desperation territory. "I know you're seeing someone. How could you move on so fast?" "My ex-wife is having what you might call a moment of clarity," I said, showing Emily the screen. She glanced at the messages and winced. "Yikes, that's a lot of emotional dumping for a Tuesday afternoon." "Want to know the funny part? She's the one who said the marriage wasn't working. But apparently, when I agreed with her, that wasn't part of her plan." Emily took a sip of her coffee and gave me a thoughtful look. "Some people like to create problems they can then solve dramatically. Makes them feel important. When you solve the problem quietly and efficiently, you took away her starring role in the drama." That night, the texts escalated. She'd apparently driven by my house and seen Emily's car in the driveway when we were having dinner and working on a puzzle together. The messages went from accusatory to outright hostile. "I can't believe you're already sleeping with someone else. 9 years of marriage and you replace me in a month. What's her name? Do I know her? This explains everything. You probably planned this whole thing." I turned my phone off and focused on the puzzle. Emily had brought over a 1,000-piece landscape that was proving to be the perfect kind of challenging. We worked on it in comfortable silence, occasionally commenting on a particularly tricky section or celebrating when we found a piece that had been eluding us. "This is nice," she said as we sorted edge pieces. "Peaceful?" "Yeah, it is." I found a corner piece and clicked it into place. I'd forgotten what it felt like to spend time with someone who actually enjoys my company. "Her loss," Emily said simply, and went back to sorting colors. The next morning brought a new development. Diana had apparently scheduled an appointment with a therapist and wanted me to know about it. "I'm getting help," she texted. "Dr. Peterson says couples therapy could save our marriage if we're both willing to put in the work." I texted back, "Good for you. Personal growth is always positive. Will you come with me?" "No." "Why not?" "Because we're getting divorced. Divorced people don't need couples therapy. But if we could work things out." "We did work things out. You said the marriage wasn't working. I agreed and took action to solve the problem. Problem solved." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." "Then you should have been more careful with your words. Words have consequences." What she didn't know was that I'd already heard about Dr. Peterson from a different source. My lawyer had mentioned that several of his clients' exes had tried the "I'm in therapy now" approach as a last-ditch effort to delay divorce proceedings or gain sympathy in court. "It's actually pretty common," Johnson had told me. "They think a few therapy sessions will prove they're committed to change. Usually lasts about as long as it takes to realize the therapist isn't just going to validate their victim narrative." Sure enough, 3 weeks later, the therapy references stopped appearing in her messages. Instead, she moved on to phase 3 of her campaign, showing up places she knew I'd be. The first time was at the hardware store on a Saturday morning. I was picking up supplies for a new project when I spotted her in the garden center, clearly not shopping for anything, just positioned where she could accidentally run into me. I grabbed what I needed and headed for the checkout, but she intercepted me near the paint display. "Fancy meeting you here," she said with forced casualness. "Not really. I shop here every Saturday. You know that." "I was just picking up some things for the yard," she gestured vaguely toward the garden center, where I could see she didn't have a cart or basket. "Good luck with that," I said and continued toward the register. "Wait," she followed me. "Can we just talk for a minute? Like adults?" I stopped and turned to face her. "We are talking like adults. Adults who are getting divorced because one of them declared the marriage wasn't working." I was having a bad day when I said that. "I didn't mean it." "Which part didn't you mean? The part where you said it, or the part where you've spent 2 years showing me exactly how much you meant it through your actions?" She didn't have an answer for that, which was becoming a theme in our conversations. The second accidental encounter was at the restaurant where Emily and I had started meeting for our weekly dinners. Diana was sitting at the bar nursing a glass of wine when we walked in. "This is awkward," Emily murmured as we waited to be seated. "Only if we make it awkward," I replied. "She's allowed to be here. So are we." But throughout dinner, I could feel her watching us. Every laugh, every casual touch, every moment of genuine connection was being cataloged and analyzed. When we left, she followed us out to the parking lot. "So this is her," she said, approaching Emily's car. "Emily, this is Diana. Diana, this is Dr. Emily Chen." Emily extended her hand politely. "Nice to meet you." Diana ignored the gesture. "How long has this been going on?" "Our relationship started after I moved out," I said before Emily could respond. "Not that it's your business. 9 years of marriage and you're already parading around with someone new." "I'm not parading anywhere. I'm having dinner with someone who treats me with respect. You should try it sometime." The look on her face told me that hit harder than I'd intended, but I wasn't feeling particularly apologetic about it. Later that night, Emily and I were sitting on my back porch sharing a bottle of wine and talking about everything and nothing when she brought up the encounter. "She's not going to make this easy, is she?" "Probably not. But here's the thing. It doesn't matter what she does. The decision is already made. The papers are already filed. She can make it dramatic or she can make it simple, but she can't make it not happen." "And you're okay with that? No second thoughts?" I looked at this amazing woman sitting next to me, someone who'd brought laughter and peace back into my life, someone who made me feel like the best version of myself, and shook my head. No second thoughts, only gratitude that I finally stopped settling for less than I deserved. The divorce mediation session was scheduled for a Thursday morning. Johnson had prepared me for what to expect, but nothing could have prepared me for the show Diana decided to put on. She arrived 15 minutes late, eyes red-rimmed like she'd been crying, clutching a tissue box like a prop. Her attorney, a sharp-dressed woman who looked like she'd handled plenty of dramatic clients, seemed less impressed with the performance than Diana had hoped. "Sorry I'm late," she sniffled. "This is just so hard for me." I sat quietly while she launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech about how I'd abandoned our marriage without warning, how she was devastated by my sudden change in personality, and how she just wanted her husband back. When she finished, the mediator looked at me expectantly. "Do you have a response to any of that?" I pulled out my phone and opened the voice memo app. "Actually, I do. I've been recording our conversations since she started showing up places uninvited. Figured it might be relevant." The color drained from her face. I played a 30-second clip from our hardware store encounter where she clearly admitted she didn't mean what she'd said about the marriage not working, that it was just manipulation tactics. Then I played another clip from the restaurant parking lot where she'd made several accusations about my character that contradicted everything she'd just told the mediator. "These recordings span the last month," I said calmly. "They show a pattern of attempting to control the narrative through emotional manipulation rather than genuine concern for our relationship." Her attorney leaned over and whispered something to her. Diana's face went from pale to bright red. "He's recording me without permission," she protested. Johnson cleared his throat. "Actually, this state has one-party consent laws. The recordings are perfectly legal." The mediator made notes while listening to 2 more clips where Diana contradicted her own story about why our marriage had problems. "Is there anything else you'd like to add?" the mediator asked me. "Just this. She said our marriage wasn't working. I agreed. Everything that's happened since then has been my response to her accurate assessment of our relationship. The fact that she's surprised by the consequences doesn't change the validity of her original statement." The property division went smoothly after that. No dramatic objections, no attempts to claim emotional distress, just a quiet, business-like division of assets between 2 adults who were clearly better apart than together. As we left the building, she cornered me in the parking lot one last time. "Those recordings were a low blow," she said. "Those recordings were evidence. There's a difference." I unlocked my car door. "You wanted to paint me as unstable and manipulative. I just let people hear what our actual conversation sounded like. I never called you unstable. You told Tom I was having a breakdown. You told Jake I was drinking too much and making impulsive decisions. Should I play those recordings too?" She opened her mouth, then closed it again. Even she couldn't argue with her own words. "This isn't how I wanted things to end," she said quietly. "Then you shouldn't have started it the way you did," I replied. "You can't declare something broken and then act shocked when someone takes you at your word and fixes it." I got in my car and rolled down the window. For what it's worth, I hope you figure out what actually makes you happy. But I'm done trying to be something I'm not to please someone who made it clear I wasn't enough. The divorce was finalized 6 weeks later. No drama, no last-minute attempts to reconcile, no grand gestures. Just two signatures on legal documents and the end of something that had stopped working long before either of us was brave enough to admit it. 3 months later, Emily and I were officially dating. Not hiding it, not rushing it, just two adults who genuinely enjoyed each other's company, building something real at our own pace. The contrast was remarkable. Where Diana had seen flaws to be corrected, Emily saw quirks to be appreciated. Where Diana had given ultimatums, Emily offered conversations. Where Diana had demanded changes, Emily inspired growth through acceptance. One evening we were sitting in my finished workshop, now complete with the custom shelves and a proper workbench, when she asked me something that made me realize how far I'd come. Do you ever regret how quickly you moved when she said the marriage wasn't working? I considered the question while sanding the jewelry box I was making for her birthday. You know what I regret? I regret that it took her saying it out loud for me to finally admit what I already knew. I should have ended things the first time she made me feel like loving me was a burden instead of a choice. But then we might never have met, she pointed out. True. But you know what else is true? If I'd stayed, if I'd begged and pleaded and convinced her to give us another chance, I would have just postponed the inevitable. Some people show you who they are when they think they have power over you. Diana showed me exactly who she was that night with the laundry basket. I looked up from my sanding. She showed me someone who could casually destroy something important just to see if she could control my reaction. That's not someone you build a life with. Emily reached over and squeezed my hand. Her loss, my gain. 6 months later, I ran into Diana one more time at a local coffee shop. She looked different, not happier exactly, but maybe more resigned to how things had turned out. She was with someone new, a guy who kept checking his phone while she talked, barely acknowledging what she was saying. The irony wasn't lost on me. When our eyes met across the cafe, she gave a small wave. I nodded back. No animosity, no drama, just two people who used to be married acknowledging each other's existence. But as I watched her trying to get her new boyfriend's attention, trying to engage him in conversation while he scrolled through his phone, I felt something I hadn't expected to feel. Pity. She was still looking for someone to control, someone to fix, someone to manage. And from what I could see, she'd found someone who was already checking out of their relationship the same way I had checked out of ours. Some people never learn that love isn't about power. It's about partnership. It's not about finding someone you can change. It's about finding someone who makes you want to be better without demanding that you become different. That night, I told Emily about the encounter over dinner. How did it make you feel? She asked. Grateful, I said without hesitation. Grateful that when she told me our marriage wasn't working, I finally listened. Grateful that I didn't spend another year trying to become whoever she thought I should be. Grateful that I learned the difference between someone who loves you and someone who loves the idea of controlling you. A year after our divorce was finalized, Emily moved in with me. Not because we were rushing things, but because we'd reached that point where being apart felt unnecessary. We built something together that felt sustainable, comfortable, and real. The house we shared wasn't filled with criticism or performance reviews. It was filled with laughter, genuine conversation, and the kind of comfortable silence that comes when two people actually enjoy each other's company. Sometimes Emily would find me in the workshop late at night, working on some project with music playing, and instead of complaining about the noise or telling me I was wasting time, she'd bring me a beer and ask about what I was building. That's the difference between someone who loves you and someone who wants to manage you. One joins your world, the other tries to remake it. 2 years after that Tuesday night, when Diana declared our marriage wasn't working while folding laundry, Emily and I got engaged. The proposal was simple, genuine, and completely free of conditions or negotiations. Yes, she said when I asked, tears of joy in her eyes. Absolutely yes. No contracts required, no terms and conditions, no performance metrics or improvement plans. Just two people who'd found something worth protecting and nurturing. The wedding was small, intimate, and filled with people who actually wanted to be there celebrating our happiness. Diana wasn't invited, obviously, but I heard through mutual friends that she was still cycling through relationships, still looking for someone who would accept her terms and conditions for love. Some people spend their whole lives trying to negotiate their way into happiness. Others learn that happiness isn't something you demand from someone else. It's something you build together with the right person. Diana taught me what I didn't want in a relationship. Emily showed me what I did want. Both lessons were valuable, but only one led to lasting happiness. During our wedding reception, my brother gave a toast that summed up the whole journey perfectly. Sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is having someone tell you that what you have isn't working. It gives you permission to find something that actually does. He raised his glass to Emily and me. Here's to marriages that work and to people who know the difference. 3 years later, Emily and I are still building something beautiful together. No ultimatums, no contracts, no demands for improvement. Just two adults who chose each other and keep choosing each other every day. The workshop has expanded into the basement now, and Emily has her own space for her hobbies. The house is filled with things we've created together. Furniture I've built, gardens she's planted, memories we've made. Sometimes I think about that Tuesday evening when Diana said our marriage wasn't working while casually folding laundry. She was right, of course. It wasn't working. The difference was that she thought she was starting a negotiation, and I knew she was ending a chapter. The best thing she ever did for me was tell me the truth about our relationship, even if that wasn't her intention. The best thing I ever did was believe her and act accordingly. Some people stay in broken situations because they're afraid of starting over. Others realize that starting over is sometimes the only way to start living. I chose to start living, and I've never looked back. Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.